Welcome to Plaid for Women Radio. This is a show focused on the business of life, communication, behavior, relationships, time management, and more. We're not here to solve the problems of the world. We're here to help you solve the problems in your world. So tune in and discover how you can reach your goals, gain influence, and be heard. Now, here's your host, Sarah Zink.
Well, for those of us who love to read, it's always a delight to talk to an author, and today is certainly no different. I am going to be welcoming here to the show in a moment Darlene Deluca, who is a women's fiction and contemporary romance author, and she just released her debut novel in 2013, and so as a new author, it will be exciting for me anyway to be able to find out the process that she went through to write, and her I'm always fascinated with the formulations that authors use, and she's going to tell us a little bit about, since then, she's released several books, and we're going to find a little bit about what makes her tick and the process of writing and publishing, and I would encourage you to connect with her, and we'll tell you how to do that later. So if you would, join me as we welcome to the show today, Darlene Deluca. Darlene, thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat.
Well,
talk about my book.
If you would, tell folks a little bit about your background and history, how you got into writing, and what prompted you to publish your first book.
Okay. Well, I've always been a writer, always been a reader. Went to college and majored in journalism. So started out in my career writing more factual, journalistic style reporting. And then I went into corporate communications, where I spent a good 25 years or so working on employee publications and magazines and communications type thing. And then went into creative writing for Hallmark Cards and was there for many years. And then I turned to fiction, and I've been writing fiction about 3 years now, and have released 4 books. I have a new one coming in January, and they are all books that will appeal to women. They're either romance or have a little fiction with romance, or what we would call straight women's fiction, which is a book about women's problems, women's relationships, real life, basically, all characters that people, women mostly, can relate to.
Well, and let's talk about that for a minute, because typically not just women's, but fiction, romance, they tend to fall in strictly one genre and don't often cross over. But one of the interesting benchmarks about your work is that not only are they full-length novels, and not only do they have multiple storylines, but they're not following what is traditional, quote-unquote, formula writing for a specific genre. So talk a little bit about that.
Right. I really like, when I'm reading, I really like novels that have a lot of depth, have different things going on, storylines, woven together, and they kind of all come together at the end. And so that's kind of what I'm writing. And I like books that have interesting characters. Again, some depth. Lots of things going on, just like we have in our own lives. It's not just a straight shot. lots of things going on. Juggling, multitasking, all those kinds of things. And I've got that in my books, and that's why they're not strictly one genre. In fact, they're all slightly different. One's a sweet romance, one's a contemporary romance, one's fiction with a little romance, and then the women's fiction that's called The Storm Within, which is the first of a trilogy. It's not romance at all. It's friendship. It's women dealing with life and parenting and working and all of those kinds of things.
When you write these books, I'm always curious when I interview an author, what exactly is it that you want your reader to walk away with, or you want your reader to do? What is the impact that you want your writing to have on the folks who read your books?
Well, a couple of things. I want, first of all, them to just enjoy being in someone else's world. walking through someone else's life and problems and issues, and just kind of maybe getting a new perspective or seeing how someone else might deal with something. And I want readers to be able to connect with my characters and the situations. And then when the book is done and, they turn the last page, I want them to feel satisfied. They don't all necessarily have a sweet, happy ending, but a hopeful or positive ending.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I want to come back and talk to the characters and how you get to that process. But let's talk about. I am a huge fan of Happily Ever After, just so you know. I just want to say, I even go to the movie spoiler because I want to know how the movies end, because I do not like, the person you've fallen in love with gets killed in the end. I have enough real life. I have all the real life I can take. So talk about, the thing about your books is that there are bad things that happen, problems, struggles. But as you said, you're really a fan of the positive or hopeful endings, and you tie up the loose strings. So talk a little bit, if you would, about that process.
Right. I just feel like if you're going to invest several hours in reading a book, you don't want to close the last page and be dissatisfied or be upset or angry or want to throw the book across the room. You want to leave, I feel like when I'm done with the book, or like you say, even a movie, I want to feel like there's some resolution. And I like to tie things up at the end. And I want people to feel good, like that was worth their time. Like you said, I've been to movies before where you sit there for 2 hours and then at the end, boom, nothing is resolved or nothing good happens. And then you just feel like you've wasted your time. I do anyway.
Well, and it's so true in that and I love this theory. An author who respects the fact that I've just given 2 hours of my life or 4 hours or a weekend or whatever that I will never get back.
That's
and
right.
So, of course, I've got all the real life I can handle. All the real life I can handle. So I want to ask you a question. I have been a fan, and I vacillate back and forth between being a fan of women's romance. Sometimes it's just softcore porn, and sometimes it's like that would never happen. And I have to say, one of my big concerns about women's romance, and I'd love for you to address your thoughts on it. Sometimes I think women's romance sets up unrealistic expectations of how men and women act in relationships. And you are fascinated with the concept of what brings people together, what keeps them together, what drives them apart. If you would, talk for a moment about your take on writing romance and your expectations and how you set up these relationships and try to make them as real as possible.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Some people really do just want an escape, and so they're okay with more of a fantasy type relationship novel. They don't care if it's based in reality. And people just want an escape, and that's okay. My preference is something that's really based in reality. It's a relationship or a situation that you could actually see happening. I'm just a little bit more that way in my personality, so I like the real life kind of stuff, and I like the whole developing of a relationship and seeing how that would actually happen. I guess I really write for an audience that is fairly mature and educated, and they're definitely not looking for something that is more erotic.
So you're writing cerebral. You're writing cerebral romance. I like that.
Yes.
I like that. Cerebral.
Like
this
that
might
too.
actually happen.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your. Just for a second, we'd love to talk about your characters, and one of the things I think is your books seem to be character driven, and again, we're very much focused on the relationships, whether it's the romance or in between families, parents, whatever.
Right.
Talk to me just a little bit about how how you pick your characters? Do you meet someone, at the bus stop or in a restaurant, or you see someone somewhere and you're like, oh yeah, there's a character in my book? How do you pick your characters and how do you develop them?
Occasionally I will take a little snippet of something that I've heard a conversation, or I've seen someone or met someone. Generally, the characters are strictly out of my imagination. And of course, when you're writing,